Hello everybody and welcome to VFR. Today we are here on the ground in Monterey, California. We're going to be doing a quick VFR check ride in the Beechcraft Model 18. You see we got the Stark Industries livery on it right now off of flightsim.to. We'll link this in the description. We're just going to fly up in and around Monterey, head to the north of the city, stay south of San Jose, climb up to altitude, put it in cruise configuration, and just go over everything that you need to do to figure out how to fly a VFR flight in the Beechcraft Model 18. And we'll also go over some of the key hardware binding considerations and some of the common issues that I've run into flying this plane, just so you're a little prepared and you know, hey, you may not be the only one going through that. So let's get into the cockpit and get it fired up. So the twin Beech Model 18 has pretty straightforward cockpit. You've got standard steam gauges here, not quite ancient, World War II vintage, mostly updated actually. So it's a good avionics package for you. Your primary instruments up here, your Autopilot is down here just below the main six-pack. Your GPS, you have a GNS 530 in this, as well as some of the other standard Asobo transponders and things like that. Engine instruments are up here with your compass. You also have a clock, and then the co-pilot's displays are there. Now, most of your start and other controls are down here along the along kind of this shelf, similar to the PC-6. You have your engine start lights, and they're all kind of scattered a little bit all over. You can see that ergonomics wasn't a huge deal because all the lights aren't together in kind of classic old school fashion. We can't turn on battery to start. Your battery switches are here. We'll also turn on the generators just so we're ready to go with that, and we'll turn on nav lights. Nav going to steady. Down there, it's a 3-position switch. So other things to do while we are sitting here, make sure that our parking brakes are set. We'll make sure all our doors and windows are closed, so we'll come back here and close the door. I have that bound to a custom view, but you click on the handle and you can close and open the doors. All right, getting configured the rest of the way. Battery is on, generators are on. We want to come down here to the center pedestal. We have our gear indicators here. You also have fuel selectors for the left and right engine fuel tanks. Just tells you which engine is going off of which fuel tank. Tail wheel lock unlock. It is unlocked in the pulled out position, so that is important. You'll want it pulled out for taxiing and locked for takeoff and landing. Some other heating and cooling things here, parking brake lever, and your engine primer knob here. Cowl flap controls are here, these large ones. We want them pulled out for takeoff. We want them pushed in once we get up to cruise in that configuration. Flap lever is down here. So getting ready for engine start. It's pretty straightforward. As I have it bound to 3 separate axes, one for both throttles, one for both props, and one for both mixtures. If we have 6 levers, that's even better. But for the start, we're going to want mixture full rich, props full forward, and we're going to open the throttle just about 1/4 of an inch there. We're going to start the left engine first, and then the right engine. We have battery on, we have the generators on. We're going to need magnetos, so the left magnetos can come on. We'll also turn on our beacon light over there. If you do need dome light or any other cabin lights, instrument panel lights, that's all up here. Your avionics master switch is also up here on the roof. So we can open up this window here just because it's a cool window to open. And we'll be able to yell clear prop out of it. Now your starter select switch over here needs to go to the left engine to start the left engine. And that is about it. So if we want to go into here, this cover covers your starter and your fuel boost pump. And now the boost pump is a little bit finicky. So if you click on it, it'll make a real big, loud, whining noise, which isn't a huge deal. We want this on for engine start, for takeoff, and usually anytime you switch fuel tanks. Now, when you click on it, sometimes it doesn't turn off all the way, so it'll start whining and then doesn't really turn off if you click it again. So what I found has helped is binding the toggle fuel pump control in Microsoft Flight Simulator to a hardware button on my throttle. So if it doesn't go off with my click spot, I just click that, and it usually you can get it to work. But that's one of the small things that's kind of annoying if you're not prepared for it. So I would recommend binding toggle fuel pump to somewhere on your system. All right, so we have magnetos on, we've got fuel going in, we've got generators on, battery is on, starter is selected. We can go ahead and toggle the boost pumps. You hear that? Can yell at the window, clear prop. And we're going to watch and make sure that the engine comes up when we hit the starter, as well as see actual propellers rotate. That sounds like a pretty good start. And we basically repeat the same checks for the left engine. Now, you can also prime the engine here. We'll pretend that this one has been flown, but switch it to the right-hand side, and you can hit the pull the prime knob a couple times. Does this do anything in sim? I don't really think so, but it's a fun little thing to do if you want that. All right, so we've got right engine selected. We need right magnetos on. Everything else should be all set. Boost pump can stay on for now, and we'll just watch the right engine to make sure it comes up. And that sounds like a pretty good start on the right engine. Making sure we have manifold pressure isn't reading the outside pressure. And that's all good. Altimeter today should be 29902. Should be a pretty clear day. Some light winds out of the north. Let's try and turn the boost pump off. See, sometimes it sounds like it just starts it again. So I've gone to my hardware switch and turned it off, and that seems to work. But sometimes you get I think you get into a loop where it's kind of on and off with, so it's just a little bit finicky. Avionics can come on. Again, your avionics switch is up there. Your master switch is up there. And that'll bring our GPS up. We can also turn our transponder on, important if you were going on VATSIM or something like that. We'll squawk VFR for this flight. We'll be VFR out to the south. Pitot heat can come on, and then I'm just going to tune in one advisory nav aid, the Salinas VOR 117.3, 117.3, 117.3. All right, so that'll give us just a clue as to where we are in reference to the airport. So you're about ready to taxi at this point. Make sure we're all lit up. We can turn our taxi lights on. We can also, if you want to, because I'm going to forget, extend your landing lights and turn them on. So we're going to taxi out to runway 28 today. Wind is 330 at 6 knots or so. So we'll take out runway 28. Now, taxiing in this airplane, obviously, it's a tail dragger, which means you're not going to have great visibility out the front. What I have found, and I've set a custom view for this, is if I lean up and a little bit to the left, we can get a decent view around the nose. You can even bump it up a little bit more and a little bit more to the side, and it might help. So that's all you need. Lights are all on. We're going to just swing it on around. Again, make sure your tail wheel is unlocked if you're going to do any kind of maneuvering. If your tail wheel is locked, you can turn the plane with differential braking. So if you have two different brakes pedals or something like that, you can also use that to turn the airplane. And it doesn't take a whole lot of power to taxi this thing. So we're going to taxi on out to runway 28. We're going to take off and head up to the north of the airport and start practicing for the rest of the things we need to do. All right, so we're holding short now, runway 28 left, and a couple things to think about while you're taxiing this airplane, in addition, are it's a tail dragger, so if you slam on both brakes, your nose can go forward, you can tip over, and if you're going fast enough, you'll have a prop strike, and you'll have to get the airplane fixed. So light brakes, partial braking, especially if you do have rudder pedals with toe brakes, that's very helpful for something like this. You can use a little bit of braking, not all of it. So for the takeoff, we want to make sure that our boost pumps can be turned on. Pitot heat on. Landing lights are all on. Beacon on. Strobe lights can come on. And we're going to roll out onto the runway. Now, on takeoff, we're going to set max power. So you can go full power. That'll be about 35 inches of manifold pressure. We want to make sure that once we're lined up, we lock the tail wheel. And then prepare to take off. We're going to... All right, so we're lined up. Tail wheel locked. Now, the airplane's going to want to fly around 70 to 80 knots. So, and I would expect that the tail wheel is going to come off 30 to 40 knots. So you're going to get rolling, the tail wheel is going to pop up, and you're going to feel a real input. So if you have, however you're controlling your rudder, you're going to have to be ready to accept, to counter that, whatever that is. So we have a wind blowing from the right, it'll probably blow us to the left. We will, we'll plan for that. But once it comes up, you'll have to kind of anticipate where your airplane's going to go. Beech 18 is not an airplane that likes crosswinds, so heavy crosswinds are really a no-go for this airplane, especially on takeoff. You can get blown clear of the runway. So I'm going to come up, we're going to get ready to go. Let's just bump ourselves up a little bit and set full power. I'm holding on the brakes. Should give us about 35 inches of manifold pressure. We can also do 1 notch of flaps. And away we go. And if we need to adjust our direction, you can use a little bit of brake. Tail wheel's up. And then again, just countering that with some rudder pedal. That's 80 knots. And it should just lift off the ground. But again, it can be a handful to get off the runway. We're on the climb out. Gear can come up. Flaps can come up. Come off the power a little bit. RPM off. Down. And you can turn that boost pump off. I don't know if they could have made that sound any louder. So we're going to come to the right here off the runway and climb up to about 3,500 where we're going to get configured for practice. So we're on the climb out now, passing about 2,000. Our best rate of climb with 2 engines is going to be about 135 knots. Best angle of climb is 119 knots. We're going to trim for 135 as we climb out here over the practice area. We're basically just going to stay north of the airport and south of San Jose. Coming up on 3,500 now, we're going to level off, let the nose come down, and trim for level flight. You should be able to get to your cruising speed pretty quickly. 175 knots is about the cruising speed. Your max maneuvering speed is around 207, and I think it's like 250 for your never exceed. So just setting up here. Now one more thing, once we're in cruise, we can now close up the cowl flaps if we see our cylinder head temperatures getting a little low. And once in the air, the airplane's pretty stable, so you can trim it out pretty well. It doesn't do a ton of radical drifting. I'm gonna give it a little nose down trim. But again, it's a pretty fun airplane to fly. It feels pretty light, but you know, not too twitchy and roll. So just hanging out now along the coast. We'll fly up the coast a little bit more. And we're getting a little high now too. So just keep an eye on that altitude. We'll set a cruise configuration 30 inches of manifold pressure. You can even come off the prop RPM a little bit more and lean out the mixture. You do have engine gauges down here, these digital gauges. You have your EGT for your left and right engines and your fuel flow, which you can use to set your mixture. Right about there. And keep that coming down. So we're hanging out here around 4,000 feet. And we're now basically in a cruise configuration. And again, there's no blower settings or anything like that to worry about in this plane. You do have a service ceiling of 26,000 feet, so you can go up pretty high, but you might struggle a little bit at the higher altitudes. Again, fuel controls down here. Your right and left engine, you can go to the aux tanks. We have 2 mains and 2 aux or external tanks that you can fill up with fuel. You also have 3 rows of passengers that you could put in, as well as a nose and an aft baggage compartment. So while we're out here over the practice area, let's start talking about the automation on the autopilot. Now, your autopilot can do basically whatever you need it to do. It's this unit down here. So to start, we're going to set the roll as the master. That should control our roll. And then altitude, like any altitude, should control the altitude. All right, so here we get to some of the issues that you might see with this airplane. Namely, the autopilot is finicky, and sometimes it doesn't work. When it does work, it's pretty straightforward. The roll is the master switch. You can hold altitude. You can also change your altitude using the pitch setting. You can also have a heading mode, which is set based off this knob. You can go in heading mode, nav mode if you want to follow whatever's in your GPS, or you want to follow your radial, or you can do a localizer. That said, right now it appears to be non-functional because I'm clicking roll and setting altitude and nothing's happening. So, I don't know, this is the second try at this autopilot too. So on the last flight we had, basically I tried to set it in roll and heading, but my HSI was off by 40 degrees and I couldn't fix it. So if you do it pre-flight check and see that your HSI is off 40 degrees off, don't plan on using the autopilot really. So hopefully that gets fixed in an update. But it is a little bit finicky in that regard. So this is why I wouldn't really recommend it for a real serious IFR flying. I think this is a fun plane if you want to do a hand flying cruise. I think that's really where it sits best. This autopilot is cool and simple to use. In roll mode, you can use this to turn the airplane. But again, sometimes, this is the second time today, it hasn't worked. So, just something to think about if you are flying this airplane. We're going to do a little loop and head back towards the airport now. We're about 4,000 feet, so we'll head back and set up for landing into runway 28. All right, so we're turning now to get set up on a wide downwind for runway 28. The field elevation is 257 feet. So we're going to set around 1,000 feet to get all configured and get our gear out and everything. Now, the Beechcraft, yeah, you can fly an ILS approach if you want to. Your glide slope will be here on the HSI, and your localizer will also be tuned in on the HSI. So you tune it on whatever nav frequency you want, and you can fly to an ILS approach if you want to. Our critical speeds, gear out is below 160 knots. Flaps can come out up below 120. You shouldn't really have any trouble getting there with a reasonable power setting. We are there now. We're set up on downwind. So we'll bring gear out and give it the first notch of flaps. Now, I like to approach between 100 and 80 knots, probably closer to 90 knots if you can. In landing configuration, your stall speed is going to be around 75, where you're going to start falling out of the air. Probably go a little slower than that, but 80 knots is a good kind of lower end of the approach speed range if you want to go for that. We are going to try and do a wheels landing, so we're not going to do a three-point landing. Beechcraft airplanes generally are flown to land on the wheels, so we're going to basically try and maintain level flight and not flare too much all the way down to the runway, and just kind of kiss the wheels on the runway and then let the tail come down. It's a little tricky, but the Beechcraft Model 18 is a tricky airplane to land in real life. So if you do a little bit of a bounce, you are not alone in the Beechcraft Model 18 community. We're going to start turning base now. Keeping some power in, we're also going to give full mixture, full rich, props full forward. And get set. Just keeping an eye on that speed. You really, in the approach phase, need to be above 80 knots at all times. We'll give it another notch of flaps, too. The field should be off our right. And we'll just keep descending. We're going to be a little bit high, but that should be all right. So just descending a little bit. And again, we want to keep engine parameters really in the green, and you'll be fine. This isn't too complex of an airplane, so keep everything in the green, and you'll be all right. Last thing, cowl flaps should be open in case we need to go around. I think technically boost pumps should be on too, but I don't want to listen to it, so we're going to leave that off for now. But if you do want to be a realistic pilot, Go and do that. We're shooting for, again, a descent rate between 700 and 800 feet per minute or so. And we're looking pretty good here. See, we got a little bit of wind blowing us. We'll try and straighten that out here on the small runway. And we'll see if we can do this on the small runway. So coming down, speed's 100 knots. Again, we're going to fly it kind of in this orientation. We'll flare a little bit to bleed off that last bit of speed. And just gently kiss the main wheels to the ground. Again, the Model 18 has made a fool of better pilots than I. But just kind of holding it there, kiss to the ground, and then let the speed come down. Start gently applying brakes, and then when it can't fly anymore, you can start to pull back on the yoke. And with a tail wheel in, just gently, again, not flying full brakes. It is a little bit of a handful, this airplane. So welcome everybody to Monterey. We definitely landed on the right runway, the runway I intended to, but it worked out actually. So again, just kissing those main wheels on the ground will help you. So we're on the ground now. Taxi wheels, or a tail wheel, can be unlocked, and that'll help us taxi. But again, it's kind of, you're going to have a lot of active rudder inputs required. It's not, and if you do bounce, that's not the worst thing. The big thing is to just bleed that speed off to the point where you can get that rear wheel on the ground. All right, and shutdown, pretty straightforward. You're going to take the mixture all the way down, prop RPMs down, throttle down, turn off the magnetos. We're going to turn off the generators. Lights off. Autopilot, everything else off. Fuel, if you wanted to be a good steward, we can turn the fuel off as well. Parking brake set. And that's about it. Hop back to the back and open up for the passengers. Oh, so I think I did read about this. I think the bug is, the bug with the autopilot is because we had the landing lights out. I don't know why that's a bug, but if you have the landing lights out, extended and on, the autopilot may not work. All right, so that's a full flight in the Beechcraft Model 18, and unfortunately some of the bugs you might encounter if you're flying it, but still a good fun flight. It's good, I think, for a VFR cruise. The autopilot's easy enough to use when it works. And again, the stupid toggle fuel button, that noise is very loud and very annoying. So when it gets stuck on, it's frustrating. So yeah, those are the big things to help you, you know, kind of logistically in Microsoft Flight Simulator. But it is a fun plane to fly. You do have to fly it a little bit differently. You do have to land it a little bit differently. It's a good cruising airplane, I think, and it would be good for any kind of world tour or cross-country thing that you might want to do. So, thank you all for coming along. Hope this helps. If you have any questions, comments, or other airplanes you want to see, drop in the comments section below. As always, this has been VFR. Take it easy, y'all.